Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Haig, Jack Poehler, and Jim Levesque.
Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It is so exciting, excuse me, to see so many faces out here. Day one of VMworld, Monday. Everyone looks pretty fresh and rested. If you still look that way on Thursday, find me, tell me your secret, because this can be a long week, but it's really exciting. And I'm a little biased, but again, no better way to start the week than to talk a little hyperconverged infrastructure, one of these trends that Pat talked about in the keynote this morning that we really want to kind of dig into. So quick introductions kind of who we have up here. I'm really excited about this session. So my name is Michael Haig. I'm part of the product marketing team at VMware. Have a long history in storage, SAN storage networking, but the past few years at VMware really focused on what we're doing with vSAN, kind of this evolution to HCI and what this has meant for the industry, how we're talking about it. So happy to be here. And I'm joined by two great people to really add a lot of meat and color to this discussion. Jack, let me start with a quick introduction of yourself.
Sure. I'm Jack Poehler. I'm an analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group, and we are an industry analyst firm that looks at vendor side and IT professional sides like yourselves and trying to figure out what makes the industry tick. My background is storage and networking and now cybersecurity.
Excellent. And then also thrilled to have Jim up here as well. So Jim, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jim Levesque. I work for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and I've been there for 27 plus years. Worked on all kinds of infrastructure there, all the way back to the mainframe, set up all the SAN infrastructure, and most recently we're moving all of our infrastructure to a vSAN environment.
Excellent. So the goal of today is really pretty simple. What we wanted to do with this session was kind of peel back the marketing hype and fluff that we talked around HCI and really kind of get down to the basics of what it is. There's a lot of people that are intimately familiar with virtualization from a compute standpoint, but maybe you're still trying to get your head around what's happening with this next wave of storage virtualization, how it relates, what HCI is. So that's kind of what we wanted to break down today and really just answer these two basic questions of why HCI, like why should you be considering that? Why is it's seeing the growth that it is? And then equally important of why now? What's kind of changed? Why is the timing for us to really consider this slightly new model of infrastructure? And again, you'll kind of get a little bit of the vendor perspective. We'll get the outside analyst perspective and the real world customer perspective. So hopefully help fill in the gaps for as you're looking at this. So let's jump right in. We went through the disclaimer. Don't hold me to anything. Exactly. No recording. So quick poll. Kind of glance up here, and I want to kind of see who's in the audience. So quick show of hands. So 4 options here. Option number 1. Let me see a show of hands of people that have already deployed HCI. How many people are already using it today? Okay, that's a big group. That's 40-ish% or so. What about the next group? How many people are planning to deploy and really trying to get your head around it? Okay, maybe equally. And then maybe kind of this third bucket of you're still just not on board yet, but you're trying to kind of decipher, is this really worth my time or should I just wait till next year?
Those are my people.
Okay, nice. And then other, who's here because they really love Jack and they just are here to support him? Okay, excellent. So, okay, that was about a third maybe between the 3. So that's great. So let's start off with just a quick level set. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page as we talk about what is HCI or hyperconverged infrastructure. So one slide here, quick snapshot of where we've come over the past 10, 15 years. So 10 years ago, building your data center was pretty straightforward. There was really one main approach to shared storage if you were deploying vSphere. It was this 3-tiered model. You had SAN or NAS, you had a shared storage system, you had a networking layer off fiber channel in the middle there for storage networking, you had your compute layer, and then virtualization on top. You had to do the whole game of checking the HCLs, making sure all your components worked, making sure your HBA was certified with your storage vendor, with your OS, with your virtualization layer, and kind of go down that game. We kind of evolved. We heard some of the pain points from customers. So kind of as an industry, we moved to kind of started coming out with what's called converged infrastructure. So the idea was to take those pieces, help to factory install them so that we did all that checking. We made sure the pieces worked together, racked for you, made it easier to deploy, and kind of helped some of those initial pain points. So that kind of got us to converged infrastructure. Kind of a baby step up from where we were. But really where the big change in what we're seeing is now what we're calling hyper-converged infrastructure. So the idea here is we're really leveraging just the power of software first off and the intelligence, these notions of software-defined storage, software-defined networking, a lot of the things that really started with virtualization and what's happening with vSphere on the compute layer. And what HCI does is it takes that software stack and it runs on standard x86 hardware. So what's the hardware we're deploying for HCI? It's your standard x86 servers, the same servers that are part of your vSphere cluster today. Big difference is now we're including a lot of direct attached storage. So we're including disks in those servers. Then through the magic of software-defined storage, vSAN, or other options on the market, you're pooling those disks together and creating one big data store. So instead of having this external data store that you're connecting to through networking, it's now internal to the disks. All those disks get pooled together. It's just a single data store. So if you go through your create VM process in vCenter, it's just another option. When you get to the storage option, you could pick SAN, you could pick NAS, or you could pick this VMFS, or this software-defined data store. Your VMs get loaded on that, and it has all the functionality that you're used to with traditional storage. Fair description?
Yep, I think that's good.
If you still have questions on that, grab us after, but that's kind of just wanted to make sure level set on the basics. Got still get questions on, okay, well, how does HCI work with SAN and NAS and some of those things? It really is a direct storage play, kind of a key thing to get your head around. All right, so Jack, let me pull you in then. So we kind of paint this picture of converged to HCI. What are we seeing in the market? Kind of where are we at with this evolution?
Well, one of the things that ESG does is every year we do a survey of IT professionals like yourselves and try to figure out what people are going to invest in, what's the key technologies that are important. And the past couple of years, converged has been important, and now we're seeing a drive towards hyper-converged. So a lot of people, a third of the people that we poll say that they're already using converged infrastructure, and a lot less, because it's newer, are using hyper-converged. But almost 90% of the people we talk to are interested in deploying hyper-converged infrastructure. So clearly it's got, people perceive that there's something there. So the real question is why, and if I might take that. Right, so the real question is why HCI? So one of the things we did is we said, okay, let's ask everybody that we talk to, what are the drivers for deploying HCI? And I realize this is an eye chart, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on really, right now, the top ones. One of the keys that people look at is improved service and support. You might hear marketing use this really ugly term, but it's really important, which is a single throat to choke, right?
I've never said that.
You never said that, nope. All right.
Not anymore.
Another buzzword, double click, right? But that really means you're buying everything from a single vendor, and that vendor has done all of the work necessary to make things integrate and interoperate and work together. When there's a problem, you call that vendor, and it's not a question of, well, you look at vSphere and something's going on, and they say, well, talk to your storage vendor, and then they say, talk to your networking vendor. So it makes it a little bit easier. The other keys, if you look at the next top 4 or 5 things that people are looking at, they all revolve around this concept of scale and agility and speed. And that's the concept that you can do things quicker and in smaller steps and use smaller steps to grow bigger faster with HCI. So I'm hoping Michael can then take that and say, how does that really work in an HCI environment?
Yeah, so one of the big benefits, we see with HCI, and this is kind of universal, we'll talk just agnostically to kind of any of the HCI solutions you're looking for, is that scalability. And again, it goes back to that basic architecture of HCI, is it's built on x86 servers, you have your disks that put on top of that. And HCI gives you that flexibility to kind of do scale up or out that we talk about. So it's very easy to scale up where you can take your infrastructure. If you realize, hey, I need a little bit more storage capacity in this system, you can add in more drives to those servers. Typically, those will get automatically pooled, again, into that one big data store, and you have more capacity. Or if you're at a point where you realize, hey, I need a little bit more compute and storage, then you get that scale out. You can add an additional node to those clusters and scale it out to keep going forward. It's depending on kind of which choice, kind of which vendor you go with, kind of the HCI solutions you pick, you can start to actually have a little bit of a heterogeneous environment. So one of the great things I hear from customers every now and then is when they're starting to deploy HCI, one of the big benefits is they can buy the latest and greatest servers every year and start to build out this infrastructure to get away from some of those kind of classical kind of refresh cycles every 3 to 5 years. We have to refigure out what storage you're going to buy, what infrastructure you're going to buy. You can now just decommission your old servers, put in the latest and greatest from your server vendor of choice, and kind of continue kind of build out this modern infrastructure using some of the latest hardware. So again, that flexibility is huge. And kind of what this means from a kind of a business benefit standpoint, so if we look at kind of a pricing, comes down to two things. One is that upfront cost. So we're shifting away from a model of buying purpose-built hardware, which typically implies a little bit more expense and cost to it, to a model that's based on industry standard servers. So a lot more competitive. There's a lot more server options out there. So we're just kind of supply and demand economics. You're talking about prices that are a lot less. And so your upfront costs to get in there is a lot less. And then as we go through this scale, and VDI is a great example to use. It's kind of one of the classic HCI ones, because typically as you're building out your virtual desktop infrastructure, you have compute requirements and storage requirements. And HCI lets those scale very well. With classic storage, as soon as you hit that N+1 user, as soon as you hit as much as that storage could fit, you had a big jump up and you had to decide, do I buy a new whole storage system to support this one extra user? And that's kind of the exaggeration we use, but kind of that N+1 user. With HCI, you just have these smaller stepping scales. So you're just adding, again, a server at a time with that built-in storage. So it gives you this more granular ability to scale and build out the environment. So that's fundamentally that scalability is a big benefit, that flexibility that we get, and then kind of the cost that goes with it. The other thing kind of, Jack, we talked on was, you kind of hit on was the manageability of it, right, and how management works. And I've taken a few screenshots here, again, just kind of from vSAN, but this applies as we kind of think about HCI in general. The more and more customers I talk to one of the big benefits for going to HCI is the savings on operational front. The ability, again, you're consolidating down the amount of hardware that you're managing, you're breaking down these silos, so you don't have to manage these independently. And then you get benefits like we're showing here, where it's literally a checkbox to enable. Features are intuitive, they're built into vCenter or the management stack that you're using. So it's very easy to manage. So for vSAN, it's a checkbox. If you want encryption, checkbox, dedupe, checkbox.
And if I might say, from both the flexibility but the agility and the speed point, since an HCI environment is tightly integrated and it all comes from one vendor, it's not, you want to do something, you go to the management console and you click the button and it happens, and it's very quick and simple. As opposed to saying, I have to do something on my storage cluster and something on my network and something on my compute side in order to accomplish it. So it makes it quicker and easier and simpler to manage, gives you more flexibility, and you spend less time working on that and more time getting your entire infrastructure up and running and maintaining itself.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And on the maintenance, the screen we're showing here is, again, just another example of a lot of the built-in lifecycle management, some of the hardware capabilities where, again, this is a tightly integrated system where we know we can do checks against the HCL. We know if your drivers, if it needs to get updated, we can have a single click to update those within the software. So really kind of streamlining the management and bringing it down. And as a result of that, what we're really seeing is, again, you're moving away from this world of having these silos of different management consoles, kind of the complexity, the processes to manage, and creating a little bit more streamlined where you can now start to unify the teams. So we talked to a lot of IT admins, and you kind of get different reactions to HCI. Some is the concern of, is this kind of making it too simple? What about kind of all my responsibilities? And then you talk to kind of upper management, and they're excited about kind of being able to streamline processes. But in the end, what it comes down to, and I fundamentally believe this, is that anybody out there not have a long list of IT projects to do? Like, are you short of things to do from an IT standpoint? Does everybody have disaster protection? Do you test it every 180 days? Do you have your cloud strategy figured out? Do you have your container strategy figured out? There's so much going on in the IT world today that it's never a concern that people don't have enough to do.
Right.
The hope is with HCI, we can take away some of those tedious jobs. Again, some of the classic storage management, which you honestly probably don't enjoy doing after the 20th time. And again, free up those resources, those funds to, again, focus on some of these other initiatives that are important to the business, and that if you can figure out storage management, then you're kind of one of the smart people out there. You can kind of do all these other things. So that's kind of talk about the different dynamics that go into simplified management. We get that discussion a lot. So the last point, and it kind of hitting back to that first slide that Jack showed on kind of what are the reasons people do this. And the other one is around deployment options. So as we talk to HCI, there's really there's a bunch of different options out there, but really it comes down to two most popular one. If you look back a couple years when HCI started, it was really a lot of times synonymous with an appliance model, which means the software, the hardware, all bundled together, built together, delivered together, kind of built-in lifecycle management, which really kind of provide that turnkey simplicity. As we've evolved, though, and kind of see more kind of value in software, we're kind of seeing the shift more to HCI being a software model, which means it's a software stack that you can then deploy on your choice of hardware. And what we're showing here is, again, top model is kind of these turnkey all-in-one appliances, or in the bottom is giving you the flexibility to pick the servers, pick the drives, pick the I/O controller, kind of some key core components that go into an HCI solution, and build those together. Vendors are do it in different ways of kind of how these are bundled together. From VMware, that bottom row is considered a ready node, so we work with hardware vendors to actually bundle the hardware together, so you can pick your preference from Dell, HP, Lenovo, Fujitsu, kind of going down the list of all of our favorite server vendors you can pick from. So you have that flexibility. And we see different options based on kind of where you are from a customer standpoint. Mid-sized customers, where you may not have a full IT staff, or you're just stretched thin, oftentimes we'll go the appliance route to kind of simplify that. If you're enterprise, where you have teams and expertises, you know how to deploy vSphere, then a lot of times they'll have preference with the server vendors, and they'll go that route of building their own, kind of being able to leverage those processes you already have in place, those relationships.
So getting back to some of the drivers, and one of the things we talked about is the sort of the top 5 or 6. As you look now in sort of the next set, it's around a lot of what Michael's already addressed, but fundamentally the next sort of set of drivers all wrap around one form or another of TCO. It's your ease and cost of deployment, of acquiring it. It's much simpler to deal with a single vendor. You can get, if you're going the build it yourself route on your hardware, you may already have purchase agreements with the server vendor, and you can get discounts. So all of that factors into why people are deploying hyperconverged and what's driving it. The other part of the equation now is sort of at a higher level, not just hyperconverged, but what are people wanting to do overall in their architecture? And that's really around data center modernization. That's sort of one of the big meta drivers going on in the industry. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as we look at these things that people are interested in doing, again, that middle section is all around, well, there's this cool thing called cloud, and then that means converging all of our solutions into one, implementing a software-defined data center, building private clouds. All of these are very interesting in terms of data modernization because the leading organizations, the early adopters, have already gone down this path and have proven the value of it. And I think now a lot of you folks are seeing that there's value there. So how does this work in HCI?
A lot of times it comes down to cost. And at VM, we like to talk a lot about this idea of server economics. And it's literally this idea that, again, these industry standard components, you can get them for a lot less than we're used to paying for, again, some of the purpose-built hardware that we've used in the past. And we can debate afterwards these prices. These are kind of examples that they're taken fairly recently. These will vary from regions and everything. But it's a snapshot of the fact that as you're looking at kind of the costs of drives, of SSDs, again, leveraging that large server industry is huge. I heard a stat recently that I liked. I mean, if you look at kind of the purpose-built storage systems and that market, there's on the order of magnitude of hundreds of thousands of purpose-built systems are shipped a year. So I mean, that's a lot. But if you look at the server market, it's on the order of millions. I mean, there's millions of servers shipped a year. So it's kind of this idea of again, economics, kind of supply and demand, where you just have so many options out there for servers, such a big market that it really is driving that price down. It's very competitive. And really, HCI lets you tap into that from a cost standpoint. Again, as you look at both those initial costs, and then as you scale and grow over time. There's one other interesting trend that I kind of wanted to talk to, and it's this dynamic that's kind of come up. And if you think back on where you started with virtualization and why virtualization really took off, it was really all about taking all these servers in your data center and helping you consolidate those down. Instead of using 10% CPU memory utilization on all these individual servers, you're kind of leveraging it a lot more with virtualization on top. So it led to this massive savings in compute and kind of funded the shared storage model and kind of the model we've had for the past 10, 15 years. There's a lot of innovation since now and then, but that fundamental model has remained the same. What we're seeing is HCI be that catalyst to really start to change things again. It's coming in and introducing kind of accessible kind of storage, software-defined storage, really kind of opening that up, saving that money on storage, saving that money on operations, which again is helping fund this kind of next evolution of kind of, you can call it the modern infrastructure or modern data center, kind of whatever marketing term you want to put on that. But this idea of being able to free up resources so that you can spend time on software-defined networking, on your cloud strategy, on containers, or on that backlog of things that you keep putting off because you haven't been able to get to. So it's kind of these interesting dynamics. We really feel HCI is that next trend that's kind of helping free up and introduce a lot more. So that kind of high-level picture, Jim, I mean, you've sat here quietly, so we appreciate that. Wanted to pull you in and kind of turn away from kind of what we're seeing from the vendor and overall picture and kind of dig into what you're seeing real world. So maybe before I even let you kind of jump into your company and maybe just kind of jump into that last slide, what's your take on that slide? Are you kind of seeing that from your experiences?
Well, how many people really know what software-defined data center is? Okay.
A couple of VMware people raising their hand.
The best way I could describe it is if you go back about a decade when everybody had telco switches in their companies and VoIP was coming around, voice over IP. And all the old technicians who took care of the switches said, no, this will never work, this will never work. But voice over IP is just too inexpensive compared to those hardware switches that were dedicated, and it's taken over. Everything is voice over IP now. Probably even your landlines are mostly voice over IP. Software-defined data center is exactly the same thing. Instead of having dedicated switches, dedicated storage, dedicated SAN, now you do everything in software, and it's exactly the same model that wiped out the telco switches in everybody's company.
Okay, so we didn't rehearse this, but at least somebody buys into my marketing slide there. All right, so with that, let's kind of turn over to kind of what you're doing with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It's a great story we kind of walk through here.
Okay, great. So I work for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which is the largest municipally owned or municipal utility in the United States. About 1.4 million power customers, 666. I'm not going to read each and every line. Most important thing is we do about $4.5 billion in revenue. So we're a big company. And we supply water and power to 2 million customers, essentially. If you ask people in Houston right now, they really would like some water and power. So, and I don't take that lightly.
Well, maybe not the water.
Clean water. So I don't mean that lightly. People really need water and power, so it's an important thing. So we can't have our systems down so that we can't not supply the resources. The other thing is we have a huge push in the industry and from our company specifically to do renewable power. So you see the geothermal up in the right and big solar plants. Right now we are actually at 25% renewable, which is pretty good. But we have goals to get to 33% by 2020 and 55% by 2030. So what does that mean? We're trying to do everything more efficiently, and we're trying to tell our customers to do things more efficiently. We don't want to be burning coal. So we just started a new data center, our new colo facility. We're going to move our data center. We had some business objectives to get there. We're a little bit different in that we're, for a government agency, in that we're revenue generating. So money isn't the most important thing necessarily all the time. For us, reliability is. We have to be reliable. That's just the bottom line. And then the efficiency that we've been talking about. How quickly can you get these things to market? If the power system needs to install a new trouble system, how quickly can I get them their equipment so that they can get their new system up and running? Performance, of course, is always an issue. And then the capacity issue that everybody who has storage, what do you grow? 33 to 50% every year, you add storage, so you better be able to deal with the capacity. And then, even though we do generate a lot of revenue, cost is still really important to us. We are beholden to the citizens of Los Angeles. They're the ones that we support. And then agility, we've talked about extensively. So, your 2004 infrastructure, how many of you guys have a traditional SAN?
Wow, that's still a lot.
How many of you that have a traditional SAN have more than one person who knows how to zone? Well, that's pretty good. How many people don't have more than one person who know how to zone? This goes back to the reliability and flexibility issue that we were talking about earlier. But this is your traditional infrastructure from 2004. And usually I have a pointer that I can do this with. So, but you have your servers and your fiber channel switches and your storage, and they're all very specific. So why now? We keep asking, that was one of the main questions. Why is HCI available now? And its technology has changed. 2004, you didn't have cores, you had a CPU. Now we have 22 core. Epic just came out with 32 core. We have tons of cores. We talked about the software-defined model. That means you have cores available for the software to do things that they didn't have before. Before, all your compute had to go to the database or the application server. Now you have cores available for those other other things that need to get done. Memory has just gotten so much denser, so you have a lot more memory available for kernel activity and things like that. Networking, faster, of course, which is one of the main things you need for a vSAN environment is you need the fast Ethernet network. Most important thing is flash. This is the differentiator. 2004, you had a 15K hard drive that did 200 IOPS. Today, you can go out and get a Samsung drive for $1,000 that does almost 300,000 IOPS. So that's a huge difference. Back in 2004, if you had a database that needed to do 20,000 IOPS, well, that means you had to go buy a whole bunch of hard drives and stitch them together, and you had a lot of stranded space. Now we can do it with a few SSDs. So that really is the main thing that has changed for why now. It's that commodity flash in the multi-terabyte sizes. So I'm going to give you an example of our actual data center. On the right, you see a couple of their rebranded Hitachi Lightning series arrays. There's some NetApp in the middle there. On the top, you have a whole bunch of DL580 4 CPU servers. That's where our production VMs were running out of. You got some network or SAN switches in there, and so like 4 of them. And at the bottom, we have a whole bunch of blades, which is running our test dev environment. So this was literally my environment, or it still is to an extent, running about 1,200 virtual machines out of that. Going to HCI, I've already implemented this. It goes down to that. And you can see that that's 6 enclosures, but the top half is compute, the bottom half is storage. I still have 25% where I can add to this. All those green spaces are empty. So I told you I'm doing a new data center. I couldn't even think about picking up my whole SAN and my fiber channel storage and moving it. That would be way too risky. So we knew we were going to have to put brand new storage and servers out at our new facility. It was the only way to do it. If I tried to do what I was doing in the past, and I even took this down from levels of a Lightning series to more like a 3-par modular storage, it was about $1.8 million for a 3-year total cost of ownership to duplicate what we had. With the HCI, it was $1 million. And that's everything. That's VM licenses, vSAN licenses, support on the servers. So it was a huge savings for us. More importantly, it did everything better. So we did real testing on our legacy environment, and we were able to drive about 25,000 IOPS from our tests. We're able to drive 400,000 IOPS from those 12 machines that we have in our HCI environment. You can see we have more cores to deal with, we have more memory that we can use, and the storage has gone up exponentially. Or not exponentially, it's 3 times. So everything is just much faster, much better, and it's in a much tighter environment, and I can expand it very easily. If I want to add each of those nodes that I deployed, I can add half a gig of memory to it. I can add another 6 hard drives to the hard drive trays. So I could do exactly as was described. I can scale up, or I can fill those green spaces with extra compute and storage nodes, and I have, I can scale out. So I have both available. This is one fun one. Taking the wattage off those servers, it was taking 58,000 watts to power that top environment, and it's about 13,000 watts to do the bottom environment. Again, we're the power company. We're telling people to be more efficient. We have to be more efficient as well, and this obviously shows If you're doing 13,000 watts instead of 58,000 watts, it means you're also not cooling 58,000 watts. So you have the cooling cost on top of that. And so we went from 256U of rack space to 24U. Pretty compelling reason to, and it literally runs everything that I was running before. Those 1,200 machines will run in here. We used to limit our machines to about 60 gig of OS space. Now I'm giving out 120, 150 gig for the OS if people need it. Not a problem. So it's just great environment.
Nice. So you're saying the term hyperconverged actually applies. You buy into that term.
Yeah, it is.
Seems like
it is hyperconverged.
That's clearly very tight.
So just really funny story, we have the colo facility that we're just building out, and when we started to do the colo facility, we're like, okay, we're gonna need this many racks. And within a year, we decided to do the HCI, but we'd already contracted for the number of rack space, so I have a ton of blanking panels. So our answer to why HCI, this is review, but increased performance. It's faster. I'm seeing jobs that used to take 2 minutes and 17 seconds to load in about 23 seconds, literally real world numbers. We've had backup jobs go from about 28 minutes down to 15 to 17 minutes. Just across the board, anything that's I/O intensive, it's a lot faster. You're running off of all flash, it's gotta be. We showed you the cost savings, 44% savings there. And the lower operational costs. I don't care that I don't need anyone to zone for me anymore. I don't need to send somebody to the Cisco class to learn how to zone. I don't need to send somebody to the HP class to learn how to carve LDEVs in my thing. So certainly I can't get rid of people, but I can reuse people in doing things like the next things for the software-defined data center. Green, we have to be green. You can see it's much, much greener than using a traditional. And it provides more reliability. You can do things like triple redundancy. You couldn't do that in the other system. You have fault domains where you can make sure that your servers are spread across rack bays, so if you lose a whole bay, it's okay, you have it redundant. We weren't able to do that with the old environment. And there's fewer pieces to fail. You don't have a whole 250U of stuff ready to fail it.
All right, well, I'll take that now. And, I think Jim and Michael have done a great job of talking about all the great things that come with HCI. So, we're not trying to hide anything here. From an ESG perspective, we said everybody's interested in this. Okay, what are your biggest concerns? And as you can see, if we look, can we go back a slide, please? The real big concern is performance. Can we go back one slide, please? Thank you. One of the big concerns is performance, and Jim just sort of told you that he was able to get a tremendous performance improvement, but while consolidating his footprint, his energy footprint, and everything else. A lot of the reasons people have these concerns is simply lack of familiarity with what HCI is and how it works. If you look at all of these concerns people have, they're really just a reflection of the benefits. So we talked a lot about flexibility and scaling, and that's actually one of people's concerns is how do you do it? Because they don't know, and hopefully some of what Michael and Jim have told you about shows you that you really can be flexible and scale. One of the other things people are concerned about is the opposite of what I talked about earlier, which is having one throat to choke also means you're locked into the vendor. So Jim, you sort of had to go through that decision process when you made your upgrade. What would you say about lock-in?
So you're going to be locked in one way or another, no matter what. If you go with a appliance, you're going to be locked into your hardware vendor. If you go with a software solution like a vSAN, you're going to be locked into your software vendor. We had already made the commitment to be a VM shop. We knew we were going to run ESX. We weren't going to run any of the other hypervisors. So we were already buying into that VM infrastructure, so it was easy for us to add vSAN to it. The benefit is the hardware vendors fought really hard for our business, and those initial deployments that we put up there, we're probably close to 80% off list by the time the hardware vendors were done fighting for our business. So you can use it to your advantage.
So as you can see, of these concerns, too expensive. Jim talked to you a little bit about how he's able to deal with that. There are some performance issues that I think a lot of these are, as you become more and more familiar with HCI and the vendors do a better job and become more established, these concerns will sort of be addressed and will disappear. All right. So one of the concerns, as we talked about, was performance. Jim was able to get great performance. So what I want Michael to do is talk a little bit about how specifically HCI does the performance.
Yeah, and we'll hit on this quickly. I mean, I think Jim gave some great examples and kind of talked through this. But if you look at most HCI solutions, I mean, the key thing is they're built to leverage flash. So they really leverage kind of all the massive IOPS and low latencies that we see from the flash technology vendor. So, I mean, specifically talking about like the vSAN architecture, just a little bit. I mean, we have a caching layer that's always flash. So you always have this flash cache helping accelerate those workloads. And then if you deploy spinning disks underneath as a persistent layer or more flash, you kind of have those options. So it's really taking advantage of those flash technologies. And HCI is in a unique position where it can, again, leverage those very quickly. As those drives come out, we can work with them right away and really build them into the system. So, I mean, there's all kinds of numbers out there. I definitely encourage you to go kind of check out some of the performance sessions this week. But I mean, seeing 150,000 IOPS with NVMe drives per node is pretty common now. Intel does have some great demos where they just show some massive screaming performance with these new technologies on HCI. So the performance is there. So usually it comes down to, okay, what are the other benefits? What are the other reasons why I want to go to HCI? All right, so we spent a lot of time really focused on kind of what is HCI. Hopefully that gives you some of the different dynamics, some of the real world example that we're seeing. Let's spend a few minutes now talking about why now. So kind of what's changed to make this go. And I've left my analogy in here, so Jim and Jack, bear with me. We'll see how this goes. So kind of one of the things about why now is it's kind of technology is known. You could have great technology, but it's not always the right time. And kind of what we're seeing and what we believe now is now really is the right time for HCI. But let's take a quick example, and I'm going to kind of go off the IT world here a little bit. Anybody happen to know what this is? No hands. So this is a car from 1898. This was the very first car produced by Ferdinand Porsche. So this is literally the first Porsche. It's an all-electric car. His first car made was all-electric in 1898. In 1900, 28% of the cars actually produced in the US were all-electric. So I mean, 117 years ago, people were looking at all-electric cars and trying to do it. But along came some guy named Ford or something and figured out that, hey, he could make things cheaper, produce a little bit more functionality. And so people gave up on this notion of all-electric cars and went to gas-powered cars. And that's really the technology that took off that's taken us through the past century of automotive. This next slide, probably a little bit more familiar. People hopefully recognize this car. This is the Tesla Model S. So what we're kind of seeing is this shift back to one of this original idea of electric cars. In fact, April 20th of this year, Tesla surpassed Ford. They surpassed GM as the most valuable automobile company in the US. So this is based on market cap and stocks, and you could speculate that it's way overpriced, but that's a separate discussion. The point is, what we're kind of seeing is we saw this idea of all electric coming back, and it is really back at the forefront. It's really driving a lot of change in the automotive industry today. And why is that? I mean, it's pretty simple. Costs have come down, functionality, reliability has come down, software, the importance of software and the intelligence that can now be put into software has become key. So I kind of relate this to HCI. I think we're seeing this same shift now where I get a lot of folks say, hey, we did DAS years ago. I mean, that's 1956 IBM mainframes. That's what you used in those systems. It was DAS, but we went away from that. So I still have people question me of, well, why are we going back to this old model of direct attached storage? Like, it doesn't make sense anymore. And I kind of use this parallel where things have changed. It's now a different world. We have different technology. Disks are a lot different. Huge capacities, huge reliability, huge performance. You don't need to kind of stitch them together, as Jim said, to get those anymore. So we're kind of seeing this shift. So if we kind of turn this analogy back to HCI and really the trends we're seeing, we talked through some of these, so I'll go through them quick, but huge change in the hardware front. Intel Optane 3D Crosspoint, massive drives. The Intel's Xeon Scalable processor launch, Pearly Skylake, that came out in July. Just these massive new processors that are coming out. All these new server form factors to choose from. HPE Synergy with composable infrastructure, Cisco Blades now, everything that Dell is doing with 14G. So across the board, a lot is happening on the hardware. That's aligning perfectly with what's happening in software. Like these Tesla cars that really rely on software to do a lot of the intelligence and provide the features of the car. We now have storage, networking, all these features delivered directly in software. It's proven. vSAN, we're now on our 7th generation of the product, so it's been in the market for a while. It's gone through the paces. And you're getting all that resiliency, all that functionality. And then third but not least is the ecosystem around it. It really is aligning with everything else that's happening. You see what we're doing with our cloud partners and Amazon and what some of the other HCI vendors are doing with cloud. You see all the data protection vendors that are lining up and supporting us. So just this massive support. So it really is kind of, I feel, kind of this perfect alignment that's kind of all coming together to make this a perfect step. Jim, kind of question for you. I mean, I know we talked about this a little bit up kind of early and want to get your perspective. I mean, so I'm kind of going through technology, but what kind of pushed your company over the top to kind of do HCI? How were we able to convince your management kind of team to really buy into this and do this massive shift?
Well, that's actually, it took us a while. Once my team and I came up with the idea that, HCI really is ready, it was very hard to get the managers and the whole department on board to say, we're going to invest our future of IT into this technology. And we had to do a lot of different things to show them that it was reliable. But I think the thing that really kind of tipped it over was we met somebody at vSAN last year who was doing hyperconverged for a couple of airlines. And they actually were running an application on vSAN that if it went down, they would have had to ground the entire fleet. So that's a tier 0 application. And once we could go back to our management and say, hey, people are running really mission critical tier 0 applications on it, that's kind of what convinced them. But it did take us a while. Showing them the numbers is easy, but you are buying into a new technology. So, it is tried and true at this point, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great story. And we're seeing those stories more and more. So definitely encourage folks to kind of look. I mean, HCI's out there. There's a lot of great stories to pick from just to understand in your vertical, kind of how other people are using it. I think we're past that point. We talk about this internally a lot. We're past that point of kind of targeting early adopters. I mean, this is a mainstream technology now, and you're not going to be the first one to do it anymore. You're following in the footsteps of a lot of people doing this. So it's a lot more comfortable ride now going down it. So with that, Jack, let me kind of turn it back over to you. I mean, kind of jump back into what you're seeing as far as kind of what's important. Kind of again going back to this why now question.
Right. So there's one of the things ESG does is we look at, we talk to a lot of CIOs, CISOs, VP IT, Director of IT, Architect type folks, and say, what are you thinking about sort of at the higher level? What's the meta trends that are driving the industry, driving IT architecture? So you can take a look at the list. There's a lot on data center modernization, the cloud, mobility. Shouldn't be any surprise to any of you here that the number one is cybersecurity, right? So the real question now is, how do IT vendors and HCI vendors think about cybersecurity? How do you guys think about cybersecurity? Raise your hands. Anybody here have a concern about security in their environment? Okay. And is this how you think about it? Yeah. So that's what IT vendors do too, because at the beginning of time, their primary concern is base feature functionality, making the thing work. Well, we've now made it work, as you've heard from Michael and Jim. HCI is here, it's reliable, people are deploying it in tier 0 mission critical environments, it's there. So now it's time to start thinking about security. One of the reasons that the IT vendors don't think about security is we have a firewall and we bury our HCI in the core of our data center where it's protected by the firewall. But that's no longer sufficient. With mobility, we have people who take their laptops, their phones, their pads out of the firewall, use it at Starbucks, get infected, and then bring it back in. And now the firewall can't protect you from that. So your environment is still insecure. You also have the situation where you have authorized users inside who can do things like get attacked by, have phishing emails where they click on a link and they download malware, and all of a sudden now you're insecure, you've got an infection inside. And humans have another way of attacking you, and that's the malicious insider, right? So you let somebody in and they have access to your system and then they decide to do something bad. So security is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. This is another way of looking at it, right? So everybody heard WannaCry and Petya and NotPetya, the big viruses, the big ransomware that hit. All of the infections and all of the ransomware, all of that could have been avoided if people had patched their systems. If you're running Windows and XP right now, you've got a very big issue. It has nothing to do with HCI, right? So VMware in particular is taking security very seriously. There was a big security announcement at the keynote this morning. There's a lot. So that's Mike Foley in the picture. He's doing a number of presentations on security, and we're now starting to see security come into the HCI environment. And hopefully Michael can talk a little bit about where VMware is looking at security in HCI.
Yeah, just talking a little bit about from the VMware standpoint in vSAN, again, trying not to get too specific in products and marketing here, but yeah, we're definitely seeing HCI. I mean, being security, it's a top concern for a lot of people. So how do we start to build the products that take this into account? So with recent vSAN releases, we now have native encryption. So really trying to kind of pave the way and set the stage to really address these. So with native data at rest encryption built into the system, so that as you deploy HCI, you could again checkbox, know that any data written to any of your drives in that system will go through full encryption, will protect you, allows you to meet a lot of those compliance requirements, security requirements out there. And kind of, again, going back to this notion, kind of high levels of HCI, is we are seeing a lot more shift to software and that intelligence going into the software, and software encryption just makes sense. Usually that added flexibility of running it on whatever hardware you want, whether it's existing drives or the latest cutting-edge Intel Optane drives, whatever you want to pick. You don't need to buy specific hardware-based encrypted drives or those types of things anymore, which can just make it easier to deploy, kind of reduce those kind of some of those troubles of getting HCI going. So definitely seeing that. Again, more announcements were this morning from Pat on the security front, but this is definitely top of mind for the vendor. So we expect to continue to see this trend in HCI of making sure we're doing everything we can to kind of tap into that ecosystem as well as offer features to deliver security.
So as we, again, go back to the meta trends and what people are thinking about, as I said earlier, one of the, right after security, which of course everybody really should be concerned about, is let's look at what the big established concerns are. And a lot of this is being driven by companies like Google and Facebook, who have, unlimited dollars, unlimited people, and can go figure out the best way to architect an environment that scales and is infinitely reliable. And that is being driven back down into the IT world and then becoming available to you. And that comes in things like public cloud or data analytics. And again, going back to data center modernization, how do you get more virtualization? How do you get condense everything, make it more reliable, make it more flexible, make it more agile, and make it scale better? So HCI is starting to do that in the cloud environment.
Yeah, and kind of want to close on one thought as we kind of start to look a little bit forward. I mean, we've kind of talked through the basics of what HCI is. I mean, another key question to make sure you kind of answer is, again, definitely going back to this why now is, okay, kind of where is HCI going? Is this kind of setting me on a path to address needs moving forward? And we're kind of telling a story here, and you'll see this throughout the week around HCI really started at the kind of focused on the data center. I mean, this is where kind of the customers and everything have been so far. We're really seeing HCI start to get pulled in two directions. One is it's getting pulled up towards the cloud. So not only as a platform to run in the cloud, but okay, how do I start to extend this to the cloud? So a lot of talk with Amazon this week from us, but a lot of the other HCI vendors are kind of looking at, okay, how do we tie this to the cloud? What is the story of HCI with the cloud? How does this new approach to infrastructure kind of open up new opportunities? Again, by having this consistent operating model, it really simplifies a lot of the troubles in the past. If you can eliminate some of the hardware-based networking that kind of Jim talked about getting rid of, if we can build that intelligence in software, make that portable so that it can go from data center to cloud and back and have all that built in and moved around in software. It just makes life a lot easier. And then on the flip side, we kind of talked about one of the trends is, again, this edge, distributed IT, and we're seeing this equal pull going down towards this notion of again, distributed IT or edge. And we heard Pat talk about it this morning if you were at the keynote, this idea of going from centralization to decentralization, or another person put it in a good way is we're kind of going from this world of having a central data center to having centers of data. Kind of your data is getting generated in different places. I mean, some classic examples of retail or oil and gas or military, manufacturing, where you have all these remote sites that you need to handle, is how do we start to deliver those features, those capabilities, those power that we provide today from the data center, but at those edge environments, and do so in a way that's still manageable, that's still cost effective.
Michael, maybe we can ask, how many people here have to support remote office sites? And yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Almost all of you, right? And you come up with your centralized IT data center infrastructure, and then your remote office is an afterthought. And now how do you support that? And this is sort of a key application for an HCI cluster where you can have a complete storage compute network and environment that's very simple, easy to maintain, that's the exact same architecture in your corporate data center and at your remote sites, gives people very high performance at very low cost with scalability at the remote site as well.
Yeah. And Jim, maybe kind of pulling you in, I know I don't think you don't have thousands and thousands of sites, but you definitely have remote locations. How does kind of this play in? Are you using HCI on those sites? Maybe kind of give some of your experiences with that.
Actually, we do. We just deployed or in the process of deploying a vSAN out in our Bishop office. Bishop is halfway to Mammoth Mountain if you guys ski. We have a pretty big presence up there. We have power lines that go all over the West Coast. They've had a NetApp up there for file share for a long time, and they had a couple of VM servers that was trying to leverage the NetApp using NFS. And it was just much more cost effective for us to get a 3-node vSAN cluster and have them replace both the NetApp and the VMs. Again, now we have 3 VMs instead of 2, so they have more reliability. Their performance is much better. So again, it's great for a small office or a branch office.
Yep. Are you seeing kind of similar operational savings? Like, are the benefits to having that same environment, central and remote?
And then we can manage that entire environment from our central location. So if they need anything done to their vSAN, we do it from our office. They don't have to know anything. So
excellent. So yeah, so it's really interesting. So kind of this week we'll be talking about a little bit more of this from VMware. But again, I think HCI, this is again a really sweet spot for where we'll see HCI go more and more. Is again taking some of that power. Again, all the benefits of some of the new hardware and providing this ability to do analytics, do capabilities at the edge a little bit better than we have in the past without some of that complexity. And then kind of the last thought is okay, so we kind of talked about this is really that journey to the cloud. And today, or kind of maybe last year, we were kind of in the server virtualization category. As you look to kind of how this is evolving to the modern data center, we really view, I mean, HCI is that kind of stepping stone, and kind of maybe closing kind of with one key thought there is, I talk to a lot of customers, and as they're trying to kind of figure out this journey, and I fundamentally believe as you look at what you're doing today with vSphere, with vCenter, with server virtualization, HCI should be viewed as kind of that next step. It's an extension of what you're doing today. I wouldn't view it as an all-new approach. You're not ripping out everything you've been done in the past and moving to something new. You're kind of extending the familiarity you have with compute virtualization, allowing that to kind of capture some of the other benefits, kind of other pieces of your data center. And then laying the foundation again as you kind of see the storylines evolve, where it's building out to this hybrid cloud, helping to tie into these different stories. If you still haven't bought into hybrid cloud, that's fine. But it's kind of, again, it's opening the doors and at least know that kind of from the vendor standpoint, kind of what we're looking at, we at least want to be able to help tie these pieces together. So as it gets there, as the time is right for those as well, we're well architected to support that. So with that, as you kind of go through the rest of the week, I mean, we're half a day down with several to go. If you're kind of looking more for the big picture, there's the full picture around data center modernization tomorrow with some of the leaders, our CTO from VMware, talking about how the storage aligns with kind of DevOps world, with management, piecing it all together. So we definitely recommend that one. Otherwise, if you have questions, we have a few more minutes. There's a mic in the middle. Feel free to step up if anybody has questions for us. Otherwise, thank you for sticking around, and we'll hang out for one-on-one questions as well. Enjoy the show. Jim, Jack, thank you.
Thank you.